My name is Ada, 68 years old, and I never thought retirement would lead me to such a crossroads. After 40 years teaching children, I moved in with my son and his wife, hoping for family warmth in my golden years. Instead, I found myself facing an impossible demand for $55,000 for their luxury cruise. When I refused, everything shattered. Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear what happened when I finally stood my ground. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns, especially when you think you have it all figured out. I spent 4 decades of my life as an elementary school teacher in Springfield, pouring my heart into educating young minds. My husband George and I had built a modest but comfortable life together. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we managed our finances responsibly, saved for retirement, and paid off our mortgage on our small 3-bedroom house. 3 years ago, my world changed forever when George passed away after a difficult battle with pancreatic cancer. 45 years of marriage ended, leaving me alone in a house filled with memories, but lacking the warmth of companionship. The medical bills had taken a significant portion of our savings despite the insurance coverage. I found myself at 65, newly retired, widowed, and uncertain about the future. My son James is 42 years old, a successful software engineer working for a major tech company. He married Stephanie, a 38-year-old real estate broker with an eye for luxury, about 10 years ago. They have one daughter, my precious granddaughter Lily, who just turned 8. They live in a sprawling 5-bedroom house in an upscale neighborhood about 20 minutes from my old home. Their house sits on a 1/4-acre lot with perfectly manicured lawns, a pool in the backyard, and all the amenities one could ask for. About a year after George passed away, I started feeling the emptiness of the house more acutely. The maintenance was becoming difficult to manage alone, and the property taxes continued to rise in our developing neighborhood. During a Sunday dinner at James and Stephanie's house, my son brought up an idea that seemed perfect at the time. "Mom, we've been thinking," James said as we finished dessert. "This house is way too big for just the 3 of us. We have 2 empty bedrooms. Why don't you sell your place and move in with us? You could save on expenses and be closer to Lily." I was touched by the offer. Living with family, especially being near my granddaughter, sounded wonderful. Stephanie nodded enthusiastically, adding, "It would be great to have you here, Ada. You could help with Lily after school, and we could all spend more time together as a family." After careful consideration, I decided to accept their offer. I put my house on the market, and thankfully it sold quickly for $480,000. After paying off some lingering debts and the remaining medical expenses from George's illness, I had about $325,000 left. This, along with my teacher's pension and Social Security, would be my retirement fund. I knew I needed to be careful with this money to ensure it lasted throughout my retirement years. The first few months of living with James and Stephanie seemed idyllic. I settled into one of their spare bedrooms, which they had graciously painted and furnished for me before my arrival. I enjoyed preparing breakfast for Lily before school and being there when she returned in the afternoon. I helped with homework, baked cookies, and shared stories about her father when he was a little boy. Those precious moments with my granddaughter filled my heart with joy. I contributed to the household by cooking meals, doing laundry, and keeping the common areas clean. I offered to pay rent, but James insisted that having me help with Lily and around the house was contribution enough. I still purchased my own groceries and personal items, not wanting to be a financial burden on them. Stephanie seemed pleased with the arrangement initially. She worked long hours as a real estate broker, often showing homes in the evenings and on weekends. Having me there to look after Lily made her professional life much easier. James, too, seemed happy with the situation, often expressing gratitude for my home-cooked meals after a long day at the office. Their house was certainly more luxurious than what I was accustomed to. The kitchen featured high-end appliances, granite countertops, and custom cabinets. The spacious living room had a large flat-screen television mounted on the wall, plush leather furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto the backyard pool. My bedroom had an ensuite bathroom with heated floors and a walk-in closet larger than my entire bathroom in my old house. The neighborhood was equally impressive, with large homes set back from the street, luxury cars in driveways, and professional landscaping everywhere you looked. It was certainly a step up from my middle-class neighborhood, and I couldn't help but wonder how they afforded such an extravagant lifestyle on their salaries, impressive though they were. As I settled into their home and daily routines, I couldn't have predicted how quickly things would change or how dramatically the dynamics of our relationship would shift in the months to come. It took about 6 months for the first cracks to appear in what I had believed would be my peaceful retirement living arrangement. The changes in Stephanie's attitude were subtle at first, almost imperceptible. A slight frown when I cooked Lily's favorite mac and cheese instead of the organic vegetable pasta she preferred. A sigh when she found a water spot on one of her crystal glasses. Small things that I initially dismissed as normal tensions in a multi-generational household. But as time went on, these small criticisms grew more frequent and more pointed. "Ada, we don't fold towels that way in this house," she would say, refolding the freshly laundered linens I had just put away. Or, "That recipe has way too much sodium. We're trying to eat healthy," as she scraped the dinner I had spent hours preparing into the trash. Meanwhile, Stephanie's social life seemed to expand exponentially. She began hosting lavish dinner parties for her real estate colleagues and clients. She joined an exclusive country club and spent many afternoons there networking rather than working. Shopping trips became more frequent, and she always returned with bags from high-end stores like Nordstrom Saks and various boutiques around town. On these occasions, I was expected to watch Lily without question. "You don't mind, do you, Ada? It's for work, and you're not doing anything anyway," became her standard explanation, delivered with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Of course I loved spending time with Lily, but I couldn't help feeling that I was being taken for granted, treated more like unpaid household staff than family. James, always busy with his demanding tech job, seemed oblivious to the changing dynamics. When I tried to discuss Stephanie's behavior with him, he dismissed my concerns. "She's under a lot of pressure with work, Mom, and she has high standards for the house. You know how she is," he would say with a shrug before returning to his laptop. As the months passed, I found myself doing more and more housework. I was now responsible for all the cooking, cleaning, laundry, grocery shopping, and caring for Lily whenever she wasn't in school. Stephanie rarely acknowledged these efforts, instead pointing out what I had missed or done incorrectly. "The baseboards still have dust on them," she would comment, running a finger along the molding. Or, "You used the wrong detergent on my blouses again. These are designer pieces, Ada, they need special care." The criticism extended to my relationship with Lily as well. "Don't let her watch so much television," Stephanie would admonish, despite the fact that I limited screen time and focused on educational programming. "You're too lenient with her homework. She needs to learn discipline," she would say, even though I, a former teacher, spent hours ensuring Lily understood her assignments and completed them thoroughly. One evening, while putting away some cleaning supplies in the master bathroom, I accidentally knocked over Stephanie's purse from the counter. As I picked it up, several credit card statements spilled out. I couldn't help noticing the balances: $15,000 on one card, $22,000 on another, $18,000 on a third. The amounts shocked me. Despite their comfortable income, they appeared to be deeply in debt. That same week, Stephanie arrived home with a new designer handbag that I later discovered cost over $4,000. She also purchased a diamond tennis bracelet that she mentioned was just a little something she bought herself for closing a big property sale. I began to understand that their lavish lifestyle was built on credit rather than actual wealth. Through all of this, my granddaughter Lily remained my joy and comfort. She would often sneak into my room in the evenings asking for stories about her dad when he was little or seeking help with a school project. "Grandma," she would whisper, "I like when you're here." Those simple words made the increasing tension with Stephanie bearable. Dinner times became particularly stressful with Stephanie, often making passive-aggressive comments about my cooking, my appearance, or my outdated opinions. "I suppose that's what people from your generation think," she would say dismissively when I shared a perspective that differed from hers. James would sit silently during these exchanges, occasionally giving me an apologetic glance, but never intervening. His silence hurt more than Stephanie's barbs. This was my son, the little boy I had raised with love and taught to respect others, especially his elders. Yet he sat by while his wife treated me with growing contempt. By the 1-year mark of living in their home, I felt more like an unwelcome guest than family. I had gone from being an independent homeowner to feeling like an unpaid servant expected to be grateful for the privilege of living under their roof while being subjected to constant criticism and disrespect. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come, and that a simple dinner conversation would soon bring our deteriorating relationship to a breaking point that would change everything. The evening that changed everything started like many others. I had prepared a pot roast with roasted vegetables, one of James's childhood favorites. Lily was chattering about her day at school, while James checked emails on his phone. Stephanie, who had arrived home just minutes before dinner, seemed preoccupied, her eyes gleaming with excitement about something. Halfway through the meal, she put down her fork and announced, "I found the perfect summer vacation for us. A 21-day Mediterranean cruise on the Royal Splendor. It visits 7 countries, has amazing educational programs for kids, and the accommodations are absolutely luxurious." James looked up from his phone with interest. "Sounds amazing, honey. What are the details?" Stephanie pulled out a glossy brochure from her bag and spread it across the dinner table, pushing our plates aside. "Look at this. Private balcony suites, gourmet dining, exclusive shore excursions. It even has a butler service and a private lounge just for sweet guests." As they flipped through the pages, I noticed the price sheet and felt my heart skip a beat. The package Stephanie was pointing to cost $55,000 for 3 passengers. I remained silent, assuming this was just Stephanie daydreaming about a vacation they couldn't possibly afford, given the credit card debt I had accidentally discovered. Then Stephanie turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ada, we were thinking this would be the perfect opportunity for you to treat the family to a special vacation." I nearly choked on my water. "Excuse me." "Well," she continued smoothly, "you've been living here rent-free for over a year now. We've covered all your utilities, most of your food, and given you a beautiful room. We thought this cruise would be a perfect way for you to show your appreciation." James nodded, still looking at the brochure. "It would be really great for all of us, Mom, especially for Lily. Think of the educational value." I sat there stunned, trying to process what was happening. They expected me to spend $55,000, almost 1/6 of my entire retirement savings, on a luxury cruise for them. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm and reasonable. "I appreciate everything you've done for me, truly," I began carefully. "But that's a substantial amount of money. That's a significant portion of my retirement fund, and I need to be careful with my finances to ensure I can support myself for the rest of my life." Stephanie's expression hardened. "It's not like you have many expenses living here with us. What else are you saving for? You should be enjoying your money now, and what better way than giving your family an experience we'll all remember forever?" James remained quiet, not coming to my defense or acknowledging the unreasonable nature of the request. His silence felt like a betrayal. "I help around the house and with Lily every day," I reminded them gently. "And while I'm extremely grateful for the living arrangement, $55,000 is simply beyond what I can reasonably afford to spend on a vacation." "It's not just a vacation," Stephanie insisted, her voice taking on an edge. "It's an investment in family memories. Lily will learn about different cultures, history, art. You were a teacher, Ada. Surely you value education." The emotional manipulation was blatant, but I held firm. "Of course I value education, and I'd be happy to contribute to Lily's educational experiences in ways that are within my financial means. Perhaps I could help pay for summer camp or special classes she's interested in." Stephanie pushed back from the table abruptly. "I can't believe how selfish you're being, after everything we've done for you." She stomped out of the dining room, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind her. James finally looked at me, disappointment evident in his eyes. "Mom, I thought you'd want to do this for us, for Lily. Don't you care about giving your granddaughter amazing experiences?" His words stung deeply. "Of course I care about Lily, but asking me to spend such a large portion of my savings isn't reasonable, James. You know that." He shook his head and left the table to follow his wife, leaving me alone with Lily, who looked confused and upset by the tension. Over the next several days, Stephanie brought up the cruise, repeatedly showing me more brochures, sending me links to videos of the ship, and making comments about how Lily was already excited about the trip. The pressure was relentless. "Your friends must think you're so lucky to have such a generous son who lets you live here for free," she would say pointedly. Or, "My friend Paula's mother-in-law just bought their whole family a vacation home in Aspen. Some people really understand family generosity." Each time I gently but firmly declined, explaining that while I would love to help, the amount was simply too large for my budget. Each refusal was met with increasing hostility from Stephanie and disappointed silence from James. The atmosphere in the house grew more tense by the day, and I began to wonder if I had made a mistake in selling my home and moving in with them. Little did I know that the worst confrontation was yet to come, and that soon I would be faced with a decision that would completely upend my retirement plans and force me to reevaluate everything. A week of uncomfortable silence and passive-aggressive comments culminated in a Friday evening dinner party that Stephanie organized for some of her wealthy clients and colleagues. I spent the day cleaning the house, preparing appetizers under Stephanie's critical supervision, and then was told to make myself scarce when the guests arrived. I retreated to my room, listening to the sounds of laughter and conversation downstairs. Around 9 o'clock, I slipped down to the kitchen to get a glass of water, trying to be invisible as I navigated past the group gathered in the living room. As I filled my glass at the sink, I overheard Stephanie's voice, louder than usual from the wine she'd been drinking. "Yes, we're taking a Mediterranean cruise this summer on the Royal Splendor. 21 days private suite, the works. It's going to be absolutely fabulous." One of her friends responded, "That sounds amazing, but so expensive. Those luxury cruises can run, what, $40,000 or $50,000? Stephanie laughed lightly. "Oh, around $55,000, but Ada is treating us. Aren't we lucky? It's the least she can do, considering everything we do for her." I froze, shocked at her presumption. She was telling people I had agreed to pay for the cruise when I had repeatedly refused. I quickly returned to my room, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. The next morning, Stephanie entered my room without knocking, her demeanor businesslike. She placed a folder on my bed. "These are the reservation forms for the cruise. They need a 50% deposit by next Friday to hold our suite. You can either write a check, or I can help you do a wire transfer from your account." I stared at her, finally understanding that she had never taken my refusal seriously. In her mind, it was a foregone conclusion that I would eventually give in to her demands. "Stephanie," I said firmly, sitting up straight on the edge of my bed, "I've already told you several times that I cannot afford to spend $55,000 on this cruise. That's a significant portion of my retirement savings." "Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed. "You have over $300,000 from selling your house. What are you saving it for anyway? It's not like you have decades ahead of you." Her casual cruelty took my breath away. I felt a surge of anger that I rarely experienced. That money needs to last me for the rest of my life, however long that may be. I have to consider potential medical expenses, long-term care, and maintaining my independence. I simply cannot and will not spend it on a luxury cruise. Stephanie's face contorted with rage. She stepped toward me, her voice rising. "After everything we've done for you, you live in our house for free, eat our food, use our utilities, and you can't do this one thing for us." "I contribute in many ways," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I cook, clean, do laundry, and care for Lily whenever you need me to. I've offered to pay rent, but James refused." "That's not the same thing," she shouted. "Anyone can do housework. We gave you a place to live when you had nowhere to go." "I sold my home at your suggestion," I reminded her. "I had a perfectly good house that was paid off." "A tiny, outdated house in a mediocre neighborhood," she sneered. "We gave you a beautiful room in our luxury home, and this is how you repay us, by refusing to help with something important to this family." The argument escalated, with Stephanie's voice growing louder. Suddenly, in a moment I still can hardly believe happened, she stepped forward and slapped me across the face. The shock of it silenced me completely. "If you won't contribute financially to this family, then find somewhere else to live," she shouted. At that moment, James appeared in the doorway, likely drawn by the commotion. Instead of being appalled by what his wife had just done, he stood beside her, arms crossed. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone cold. "Your mother is refusing to help us with the cruise," Stephanie said, tears now streaming down her face in what I recognized as a performance for James's benefit. "After everything we've done for her." I looked at my son, my hand still on my cheek where Stephanie had slapped me. James, she just hit me. Your wife physically assaulted me for refusing to give her $55,000. I expected shock apology, some indication that he understood the gravity of what had just occurred. Instead, his expression hardened. If you won't help the family, Mom, maybe you shouldn't be part of it, he said coldly. I'm tired of your selfishness. You've always been tight with money, even when I was a kid. Well, now it's time to pay up. If you want to stay here, you'll pay for the cruise. Otherwise, I'll squeeze every cent out of you in other ways. In that moment, something broke inside me. This was my son, my only child, the boy I had raised with love and sacrifice. Now he stood before me, essentially extorting money from his own mother, siding with someone who had just physically attacked me. Lily appeared in the hallway behind them, her small face crumpled in confusion and fear. Daddy, why are you yelling at Grandma? Stephanie turned to her. Go back to your room, Lily. Grandma and Daddy and I are having an adult conversation. You need to be out of this house in 48 hours, James added, his voice flat, since you value your money more than your family. I looked from my son to Stephanie, then to my precious granddaughter who had begun to cry. In that moment, I made my decision. I don't need 48 hours, I said, rising from the bed with as much dignity as I could muster. I'll leave today. As I began to gather my belongings, Lily broke away from her mother and ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist. Don't go. Grandma, please don't go. I hugged her tightly, my heart breaking. I have to, sweetheart. But I'll always love you. Never forget that. Stephanie pulled Lily away from me. Look what you're doing to her, she hissed. This is your fault. I continued packing silently, tears streaming down my face as I listened to Lily sobbing as they took her back to her room. Within an hour, I had packed my essential belongings into 2 suitcases and a few boxes. I called an Uber to take me to a nearby hotel, not even certain where I would go next. As I waited in the foyer for my ride, James approached me one last time. This didn't have to happen, Mom. You brought this on yourself. I looked at my son, a stranger to me now, and replied, No, James. You and Stephanie made this choice, and someday I hope you realize what you've done. The Uber arrived, and I walked out of their house with no destination in mind, my heart shattered, but my spirit somehow surprisingly intact. The Uber driver must have sensed my distress because he quietly helped load my luggage without asking questions. I gave him the name of a modest hotel about 20 minutes away, not having any better idea of where to go. As we drove away from the house that had been my home for the past year, I watched the manicured lawns and impressive facades of the neighborhood recede in the distance, feeling both devastated and oddly relieved. Are you okay, ma'am? The driver finally asked as we neared the hotel. I wiped away tears I hadn't realized were falling. I will be, I answered, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. The hotel room was clean but impersonal, with generic artwork on the walls and a view of the parking lot. I sat on the edge of the bed, surrounded by my hastily packed belongings, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. How had my relationship with my son deteriorated to this point? How had I not seen the signs earlier? And most importantly, what was I going to do now? I allowed myself one night of tears and grief. Then in the morning, I began making plans. First, I called my closest friend Dorothy, a fellow retired teacher who had been widowed about 5 years before me. We had supported each other through the worst of our grief, but had seen less of each other since I moved in with James and Stephanie. Ada, my God, are you serious? She exclaimed after I recounted what had happened. They kicked you out because you wouldn't pay $55,000 for their luxury cruise. It sounds absurd when you say it out loud. I admitted, feeling a flash of anger replacing some of the hurt. But yes, that's exactly what happened. Where are you now? A hotel nonsense. You're coming to stay with me until you figure things out, she insisted. Dorothy lived in a 2-bedroom apartment about 30 minutes from James and Stephanie's neighborhood. The second bedroom is just sitting there empty except when my grandkids visit. It's yours for as long as you need it. I felt a wave of gratitude for true friendship, the kind that doesn't come with conditions or demands. Are you sure, Dorothy? I don't know how long it will take me to find a place of my own. I'm absolutely sure. In fact, I'll be delighted to have the company. Since Roger died, the apartment gets too quiet sometimes. By that afternoon, I had checked out of the hotel and moved my meager possessions into Dorothy's spare bedroom. The room was small but comfortable with a single bed, a dresser, and a small desk by the window. Dorothy had hurriedly cleared out some craft supplies and guest bedding to make space for me. "It's not much," she apologized, "but it's yours for as long as you need it." "It's perfect," I assured her, feeling the first glimmer of hope since the confrontation. Over a cup of tea at her kitchen table, we began to discuss my situation more practically. "Have you called James? Has he reached out to you?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, but I did get a text from Stephanie." I showed her the message that had come through earlier that day. "If you don't send the cruise deposit by Friday, we'll be consulting our lawyer about back rent and expenses for the past year. Don't think you can just walk away." Dorothy's face flushed with anger. "The nerve! After you cooked and cleaned and provided free childcare for a year, they should have been paying you." "I'm worried about Lily," I admitted. "She was so upset when I left. I hate that she had to witness all of that." As if on cue, my phone rang with Lily's special ringtone, a song from her favorite movie that we had set together. I answered immediately. "Grandma," came her small, tearful voice. "Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm fine, sweetie," I assured her, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'm staying with my friend Dorothy for a while." "Mom and Dad said you left because you don't want to be part of our family anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "That's not true, is it? You still love me, right?" My heart shattered all over again. "Of course I still love you, Lily. I will always love you no matter what. Sometimes adults disagree about things, but it never ever changes how much I love you." "Can I come see you?" she asked hopefully. "We'll have to work that out with your parents," I said carefully, not wanting to make promises I couldn't keep. "But I'll find a way to see you soon, I promise." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long moment processing the conversation. "They're telling her I abandoned the family," I finally said to Dorothy, my voice tight with anger. "They're making me the villain." "Then you need to protect yourself legally and financially," Dorothy said firmly. "If they're already threatening legal action, you need to be prepared." She was right. Despite my heartbreak, I needed to think clearly about my future and protect the assets I had. The money from selling my house wasn't just about me. It represented decades of work and saving with George. It was meant to secure my independence in old age and perhaps leave something for Lily someday. I couldn't allow James and Stephanie to bully me into spending it irresponsibly, or worse, try to take it through legal intimidation. The next few days with Dorothy were a balm for my wounded spirit. We fell into an easy routine of shared meals, reminiscing about our teaching days, and practical discussions about my next steps. She didn't push when I needed quiet time to process my grief, but she was there with practical advice when I was ready to hear it. "You know," she said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine, "as awful as this situation is, there's a kind of freedom in it too. You get to decide exactly what you want your life to look like now without compromising for anyone else." Her words struck a chord. For the past year, I had been walking on eggshells in James and Stephanie's home, trying to fit into their expectations and requirements. Before that, I had been consumed with caring for George through his illness. And before that, it had been decades of considering James's needs, George's preferences, my students' requirements. When was the last time I had made decisions solely based on what I wanted? "You're right," I said slowly, the realization dawning on me. "This isn't just an ending. It could be a beginning too." With that new perspective, I began to plan my next steps with a clearer mind and a strengthening resolve. I was 68 years old, but I was far from helpless. I had resources, experience, and now a determination to create a life on my own terms. The first step in reclaiming my independence was to protect myself legally and financially. On Dorothy's recommendation, I made an appointment with Susan Taylor, an attorney who specialized in elder law and family matters. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, the interior warm and inviting, rather than cold and intimidating like many law offices I had visited. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm so sorry about what you're going through," Susan said after I had explained my situation. "Unfortunately, family financial exploitation of elders is something I see far too often in my practice. I never thought it would happen to me," I admitted, "especially not from my own son." Susan nodded sympathetically. It's particularly painful when it comes from family. Now let's talk about your immediate concerns. You mentioned that your daughter-in-law has threatened legal action regarding back rent. Yes. I confirmed, showing her the text messages. They never asked for rent while I lived there. In fact, James specifically refused when I offered. That works in your favor, Susan explained. Without a formal rental agreement or any documented request for payment, they would have a very difficult time making that case in court. Additionally, the value of the services you provided, childcare, cooking, cleaning, could be calculated as in-kind contribution that would likely exceed any reasonable rent for a single room. I felt a wave of relief. So they're just trying to intimidate me? Most likely. People often make legal threats without understanding the law. Now, regarding your assets, you're wise to be concerned about protecting them. Let's talk about your options. Over the next hour, Susan outlined several strategies. First, she recommended I immediately move my money from the joint bank account I had established with James years ago, just in case of emergency, to a new account solely in my name at a different bank. I was shocked to learn that with a joint account, James could legally withdraw all the funds without my permission. Next, she continued, we should discuss creating a revocable living trust for your assets. This gives you control during your lifetime, but can help protect your assets if you become incapacitated, and can specify exactly how you want your money distributed after your death. We also discussed creating a new will advance healthcare directives and a power of attorney that would name someone other than James to make decisions if I became unable to do so. What about Lily? I asked. I want to ensure that she's provided for, but I don't trust her parents to manage money I might leave her. A trust is perfect for that situation, Susan explained. We can set up an education trust for Lily that can only be used for specific purposes like college tuition, with a trustee of your choosing overseeing the funds. By the end of our meeting, I had a clear plan for protecting my assets and a follow-up appointment scheduled to sign the necessary documents once they were prepared. I left Susan's office feeling empowered for the first time since the confrontation with James and Stephanie. My next step was to meet with a financial advisor recommended by Susan. Frank Williams worked primarily with retirees and had extensive experience helping clients plan for long-term financial security. His office was in the same building as Susan's, making it convenient to see both on the same day. Based on your current assets and income from your pension and Social Security, Frank said after reviewing my financial situation, you have several options for housing within your budget that would allow your principal to continue growing for future needs. We discussed whether renting or buying made more sense at my age, the pros and cons of different neighborhoods, and how much I could realistically afford to spend on housing while maintaining financial security. I would recommend looking for a small condo or townhouse in the 20 to 25% of your asset range, he advised. That would allow you to purchase without a mortgage, keep your monthly expenses reasonable with just taxes, insurance, and HOA fees, and preserve the majority of your capital for future needs and growth. With Frank's guidance, I established a clear budget and investment strategy that would provide for my needs while protecting my financial future. He also helped me understand how to structure the education trust for Lily that Susan would be setting up legally. Armed with legal and financial advice, I now felt ready to take the next practical steps. I began searching online for suitable housing options within my budget. While staying with Dorothy was working well in the short term, I knew I needed my own space eventually. I also reached out to my former principal at the elementary school where I had taught for so many years. Though fully retired, I wondered if there might be opportunities for part-time tutoring or substitute teaching to supplement my income and keep me active and engaged. Ada, we would love to have you back in any capacity, Martha, the principal, told me enthusiastically. We actually have a new reading intervention program that needs qualified teachers for 3 hours a day. The pay isn't extraordinary, but for someone with your experience and qualifications, it would be steady part-time work during the school year. The prospect of returning to teaching, even on a limited basis, filled me with unexpected joy. It would provide additional income, but more importantly, it would give me purpose and connection. As these pieces began falling into place, I felt increasingly confident about my path forward. I drafted a careful email to James, not engaging with the threats or accusations, but simply explaining my position once more. I cared deeply for him and Lily, but I could not responsibly spend such a large sum on a luxury cruise, and I was disappointed in how the situation had been handled. I closed by expressing hope that we could eventually repair our relationship for Lily's sake, if nothing else. Days passed with no response from James, but I did receive another message from Stephanie, even more threatening than before. Our lawyer says we can sue for back rent at market value plus utilities and food for the entire year. That's about $36,000. Pay for the cruise or we'll take you to court. Rather than responding directly, I forwarded the message to Susan, who sent a brief professional letter to James and Stephanie explaining that any legal claims for back rent would be vigorously contested with documentation of the extensive services I had provided and witness statements regarding their original offer of free housing. The letter closed by suggesting that further communication should go through proper legal channels if they wished to pursue the matter. After that, the threats stopped. I didn't hear from either James or Stephanie, which brought both relief and sadness. Lily continued to call when she could, though I suspected her parents didn't know about our conversations. She missed me terribly, she said, and didn't understand why I had left. I explained in age-appropriate terms that her grandmother needed her own space now, but that my love for her would never change. As weeks passed and I settled into a new routine with Dorothy, applied for the part-time teaching position, and began viewing potential homes to purchase, I found myself reflecting on the meaning of family and generosity. I decided that rather than becoming bitter about what had happened, I would channel my energy into helping others. I began volunteering at a community center that offered after-school programs for children from low-income families. Many of the children reminded me of my students over the years, bright and curious, but facing challenges at home. Working with them brought me joy and perspective, reminding me that despite my personal difficulties, I still had much to offer and much to be grateful for. Dorothy observed the change in me one evening after I returned from volunteering. "You seem different, Ada. Stronger somehow." I thought about it and realized she was right. I am stronger. When James and Stephanie threw me out, I thought my life was over. But actually, it was just beginning a new chapter. 2 months after the confrontation that changed everything, I moved into my new home, a cozy 2-bedroom condo in a pleasant community about 15 minutes from Dorothy's apartment. The complex featured well-maintained gardens, a community pool, and a small clubhouse where residents gathered for social events. Many of my neighbors were retirees like me, while others were young professionals or small families just starting out. My unit was on the second floor with a small balcony overlooking a courtyard garden. It wasn't large, just over 900 square feet, but it was mine. I had purchased it outright for $160,000, leaving me with sufficient savings for my future needs. The monthly HOA fees and property taxes were manageable on my pension and Social Security, especially with the supplemental income from my new part-time teaching position. Dorothy helped me furnish the place with a mix of essential new purchases and some treasured pieces from my former home that I had stored when moving in with James and Stephanie. My favorite reading chair, George's old desk, and the quilt my mother had made for us as a wedding gift now adorned my new space, bringing comfort and continuity. "It feels like home already," Dorothy commented as we shared a bottle of wine on my balcony the evening after I moved in. "It does." I agreed, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. My own space, my own rules, my own life. We toasted to new beginnings, and I felt immense gratitude for Dorothy's friendship through this difficult transition. She had been my rock, offering practical help, emotional support, and the spare bedroom that had given me time to get back on my feet. The next morning, as I was arranging books on my new shelves, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Mom?" James's voice came through sounding hesitant and uncharacteristically subdued. My heart raced. After 2 months of silence, I hadn't expected to hear from him. "Yes, James. It's me." There was a long pause before he spoke again. I heard you bought a place. Dorothy told Lily, and she told us." "Yes, I did. A small condo." It's nice. Another pause. Can we talk in person, I mean? I took a deep breath considering the request. Part of me wanted to refuse to protect myself from further hurt, but another part, the part that would always be his mother, despite everything, couldn't shut the door entirely. We can meet for coffee, I suggested, naming a cafe halfway between our homes. Tomorrow at 10. He agreed quickly, as if afraid I might change my mind. After we hung up, I sat in my reading chair, emotions swirling. What could he possibly have to say? Was this a sincere attempt to reconcile, or another strategy to get money from me? I decided to keep my expectations low and my boundaries firm. The next morning I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early and chose a table near the window. James arrived precisely at 10, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen him. His usually neat hair needed a trim, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me, his hands fidgeting nervously with the paper napkin. "You look well, Mom," he said finally. "Thank you. I am well." I waited, letting him take the lead in the conversation he had requested. He took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology, a massive one. What happened? What I did? It was unforgivable." I remained silent, watching him struggle with his words. "Stephanie and I are separated," he continued, looking down at his coffee. "Have been for almost a month now." This surprised me. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it despite everything. Divorce was painful, and I knew it would be hard on Lily. "Don't be sorry. It's been a long time coming, honestly. The cruise was just the final straw." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "There was never going to be a cruise, Mom. Stephanie has a shopping addiction. She's in debt up to her eyeballs. Credit cards, personal loans, you name it. The $55,000 wasn't for a cruise. It was to pay off some of her creditors who were threatening legal action." The revelation stunned me, though. In retrospect, the signs had been there all along: the constant shopping, the new luxury items, the credit card statements I had glimpsed. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair, looking ashamed. I was embarrassed, and I was enabling her, covering for her, helping her hide the extent of the problem from everyone, including myself. "When she came up with the cruise idea as a way to get money from you, I went along with it because I was desperate. Her debt was threatening to sink us, and I didn't know what else to do." "You could have been honest with me, James. You could have asked for help in a straightforward way." "Would you have given us $55,000 to pay off shopping debts?" he asked, a hint of his old defensiveness returning. "Probably not," I admitted. "But I might have helped in other ways. Recommended financial counseling, perhaps contributed to Lily's education fund directly, or helped with legitimate expenses while you got back on your feet." I paused, then added firmly, "But threatening me, allowing your wife to physically assault me, and throwing me out of your home was never an acceptable response, no matter how desperate you were." He winced. "I know. God, Mom, I know. I've been seeing a therapist since Stephanie moved out, trying to understand how I became someone who would treat his own mother that way." His voice broke. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am, and that I understand now how wrong I was." I felt a complex mix of emotions, hurt still raw, but also a mother's enduring love for her child, even when that child has caused pain. "What's happening with Lily through all this?" I asked, my primary concern being for my granddaughter. "She's with me most of the time. Stephanie has her on weekends." He hesitated, then added, "She misses you terribly. She asks about you all the time." "I miss her too. We talk on the phone sometimes, but it's not the same." Would you be willing to see her? Maybe have her over to your new place sometimes? I know she'd love that, and I'd like her to have you in her life, even if I've messed up my relationship with you beyond repair." His request touched me. Despite everything, the thought of being a regular part of Lily's life again filled me with joy. "I'd like that very much," I said softly. We talked for another hour, James explaining more about the separation, the financial counseling he was now getting, and his hopes to rebuild his life on a more honest foundation. He didn't ask for money or make excuses for his behavior. He simply owned his mistakes and expressed genuine remorse. As we prepared to leave, James asked hesitantly. "Your new place. Do you like it?" I smiled, thinking of my peaceful condo with its small balcony and morning sunshine. "I do. It's just right for me. Small enough to manage easily, but big enough for company, including a special corner in the second bedroom for when a certain granddaughter might visit." For the first time he smiled too, a glimpse of the sun I remembered. "I'm glad, Mom. Really glad." We parted with a cautious hug, the first steps on what would be a long road to rebuilding trust. I drove home to my condo feeling lighter, not because all was forgiven and forgotten, but because there was now a path forward that included Lily in my life, and perhaps eventually a healthier relationship with my son. The following weekend, James brought Lily to visit my new home. Her delight in exploring every corner, exclaiming over the small guest room I had decorated with her in mind, and her tight hugs reminded me of what truly mattered in life. With Susan Taylor's help, I established the education trust for Lily, ensuring that regardless of her parents' financial situations, funds would be available for her college education. I continued my part-time teaching job, finding deep satisfaction in helping children improve their reading skills. I made friends in my condo community, joined a book club, and even started taking watercolor painting classes, something I had always wanted to try but never found time for. Dorothy remained my closest friend, our bond strengthened by the crisis we had weathered together. We traveled to the Grand Canyon that fall, a trip I had long dreamed of, but had always put off for various reasons. As for James, our relationship began to heal slowly. Trust once broken does not mend overnight, but we established new, healthier boundaries. He attended therapy regularly and worked to understand the dynamics that had led him to betray his own values. Stephanie eventually sought help for her shopping addiction as well, though their marriage did not recover. Looking back now, almost a year after that fateful confrontation over a cruise that never existed, I can see that what seemed like an ending became an unexpected beginning. At 68, I discovered an independence and strength I hadn't known I possessed. I learned that family love is precious, but should never become a chain of obligation that leads to exploitation. I found that setting boundaries is not selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. Most importantly, I realized that it's never too late to start a new chapter. My story didn't end when George died, when I sold my house, or when I walked out of James and Stephanie's home with no destination. Instead, each of these endings became a doorway to something new, something I couldn't have imagined, but that has brought unexpected joy and peace. Have you ever had to stand your ground with family, even when it was painful? What hard boundaries have you had to set to protect yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, and if my experience has helped you in any way, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of life's unexpected journeys. Remember, sometimes the most difficult endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to write your own next chapter, whatever it may be.